The small jewelry shop glittered under the soft glow of golden lights. Glass cases displayed rings, necklaces, and bracelets that sparkled like tiny stars. Well-dressed customers browsed, their polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. Sales assistants in crisp suits moved gracefully, offering polite smiles, but only to those who looked like they belonged. Near the entrance, a young woman stood quietly. Her clothes were simple: faded jeans, a plain t-shirt, and worn-out sneakers. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and she carried no designer bag, just a small, old backpack. She looked around with curious eyes, taking in the luxury around her. No one greeted her. The sales staff glanced at her, then quickly looked away, as if she were invisible. One of the assistants, a tall woman with perfectly styled hair, even turned her back deliberately when the young woman approached a display. "Excuse me," the young woman said softly, pointing at a delicate silver bracelet. "Could I see this one, please?" The sales assistant barely glanced at her. "That one is quite expensive," she said, her tone cool. "Maybe you'd prefer something simpler?" The young woman blinked but didn't argue. She simply nodded and moved to another section. Again, no one offered help. One customer, a man in an expensive suit, even smirked as he watched her being ignored. She didn't react. Instead, she walked slowly, observing every piece, every price tag, her expression unreadable. After nearly 20 minutes of being overlooked, she finally left the store, without buying anything. Outside, the city buzzed with noise and movement. Cars honked, people rushed by, and the sun shone brightly overhead. The young woman took a deep breath, then pulled out her phone. She dialed a number and waited. "Yes, I've seen enough," she said quietly into the phone. "Prepare the transfer. I'll be back tomorrow." She ended the call, slipped the phone into her pocket, and walked away, her steps light, her mind clearly set on something big. Little did the jewelry store staff know, their biggest sale was coming, and the woman they had ignored would soon become their most important customer. The next morning, the jewelry store opened as usual. The same polished sales staff straightened their ties, adjusted their name tags, and prepared for another day of dealing with wealthy clients. The manager, a stern man with a sharp suit, reminded them of their monthly sales targets. "Remember," he said, "high-end customers expect discretion and respect. Don't waste time on window shoppers." The tall saleswoman from the day before smirked. She had already decided who was worth her time and who wasn't. Just before noon, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the store. A driver in a crisp uniform stepped out and opened the rear door. The same young woman from yesterday emerged, but she looked completely different. Gone were the faded jeans and old sneakers. Now, she wore a tailored dress, elegant heels, and a designer handbag that cost more than some people's monthly rent. Her hair was styled softly around her shoulders, and subtle but expensive-looking jewelry adorned her wrists and neck. She walked into the store with quiet confidence. This time, the sales staff noticed her immediately. The same woman who had ignored her yesterday rushed forward, a bright, practiced smile on her face. "Good morning, madam," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Welcome back. How may I assist you today?" The young woman barely glanced at her. Instead, she looked around slowly, as if searching for someone else. The manager, sensing an important customer, stepped in smoothly. "It's a pleasure to have you here," he said, his tone warm. "Is there anything specific you're looking for?" The young woman finally met his eyes. "Yes," she said calmly. "I'd like to see your most exclusive collection. The pieces you don't display openly." The manager's smile widened. This was the kind of request that meant a serious sale. He gestured toward a private viewing room at the back of the store. "Right this way, please." As they walked, the saleswoman who had snubbed her the day before tried to catch her eye, suddenly eager to help. But the young woman didn't even acknowledge her. Inside the private room, velvet-lined cases held the store's rarest jewels, diamond necklaces, emerald bracelets, and sapphire rings that shimmered under the soft lighting. The manager handed her a glass of champagne, which she accepted with a polite nod. "These are our finest pieces," he said proudly. "Limited editions, one-of-a-kind designs. Perfect for a woman of your taste." She examined them carefully, her fingers lightly tracing over a diamond-studded bracelet. Then, without hesitation, she pointed to 3 of the most expensive items in the case. "I'll take these." The manager's eyes flickered with surprise and delight. "An excellent choice," he said smoothly. "Shall I have them prepared for you?" She nodded. "Yes. And I'd like them gift-wrapped." "Of course." He turned to call for assistance, but before he could, she spoke again. "Oh, and one more thing." Her voice was calm, but there was something in her tone that made him pause. "Yes?" She looked directly at him. "The assistant who helped me yesterday, where is she?" The manager blinked. I'm not sure. Would you like me to call her?" The young woman smiled faintly. "No. I just wanted to make sure she sees this." Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a black credit card, the kind only given to the wealthiest clients. The manager's expression shifted instantly. He had seen cards like this before, but rarely. This wasn't just a rich customer, this was someone with serious power. As he processed the payment, whispers spread among the staff. The saleswoman who had dismissed her the day before stood frozen near the doorway, her face turning pale as she realized her mistake. The young woman didn't even look at her. When the transaction was complete, the manager personally handed her the elegantly wrapped boxes, bowing slightly. "Thank you for your business. We hope to see you again." She took the bags, her expression unreadable. "You will." Then she turned and walked out, leaving the entire store in stunned silence. Outside, the black car waited. The driver opened the door for her, and as she slid inside, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. This wasn't just about buying jewelry. It was about making sure they never ignored her again. The black car pulled away from the jewelry store, leaving behind a stunned silence. Inside, the young woman leaned back, her fingers lightly tracing the edges of the velvet gift boxes. She wasn't just holding expensive jewelry, she was holding proof. Proof that people judged too quickly. Proof that respect shouldn't come with a price tag. She glanced out the window as the city blurred past. Her phone buzzed, a message from her accountant confirming the transfer. She didn't reply. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment, remembering why she had walked into that store in the first place. 3 months earlier. A small apartment, cramped but clean. The same young woman sat at a rickety table, staring at a laptop screen. Numbers flashed, bank statements, investment reports, legal documents. She had spent years saving, sacrificing, and working in silence while the world barely noticed her. She wasn't always wealthy. In fact, she had grown up with nothing. Hand-me-down clothes, meals stretched thin, nights spent studying under a flickering lamp while others slept comfortably. But she had a sharp mind and a relentless drive. While others spent, she saved. While others showed off, she planned. And then, one day, it all paid off. A business she had quietly built from scratch, a simple idea no one believed in, suddenly took off. Investors fought to get in. Offers poured in. And before she knew it, the numbers in her bank account had more zeros than she could have imagined. But she didn't change. Not really. She still wore the same simple clothes. Still lived modestly. Still walked through life unnoticed, until she decided to test the world. Back in the present. The car stopped in front of a luxury hotel. The driver opened her door, and she stepped out, the weight of her shopping bag subtle but noticeable. The hotel staff greeted her warmly, they knew her well here. As she walked through the grand lobby, heads turned. Guests whispered. The same people who wouldn't have glanced at her yesterday now eyed her with curiosity, even envy. She didn't care. Up in her suite, she placed the jewelry boxes on the bed and pulled out her phone. Scrolling through her contacts, she paused at one name, the only person who had never treated her differently, rich or poor. She hesitated, then dialed. A warm, familiar voice answered. Hey. I was just thinking about you. She smiled, a real one this time. Guess what I did today? Meanwhile, back at the jewelry store. The air was thick with tension. The manager had called an emergency staff meeting, his face tight with frustration. What happened today was unacceptable, he said sharply. We lost a high-value client because of sheer negligence. The saleswoman who had ignored the young woman shifted uncomfortably. I didn't realize. That's the problem, the manager cut in. You assumed. And because of that, she spent over 6 figures in one visit, and none of you will get commission from it. A stunned silence fell. The manager sighed. From now on, every customer gets treated with respect. No exceptions. But the damage was done. The young woman had already made her point. Later that night, in her hotel room, she carefully opened one of the jewelry boxes, the diamond bracelet she had been ignored over the day before. She held it up, watching the stones catch the light. Then, without hesitation, she placed it back in the box and sealed it. This wasn't for her. It was a gift. For someone who had always seen her, not her clothes, not her money, but her. And tomorrow, she would deliver it in person. The next morning, the young woman woke up early. Sunlight streamed through the windows of her hotel suite, casting a golden glow over the room. The jewelry boxes sat neatly on the dresser, untouched since last night. She dressed simply again, jeans, a plain blouse, and comfortable shoes. No designer labels, no flashy accessories. Just her. But this time, she carried something more valuable than any jewel, a purpose. A small cafe on the outskirts of the city. The bell above the door chimed softly as she walked in. The cafe was cozy, with the smell of fresh coffee and baked bread filling the air. A few customers sat scattered at tables, chatting or reading. Behind the counter, an older woman, her hair streaked with gray, her hands slightly worn from years of work, looked up. The moment their eyes met, the woman's face lit up with pure joy. You came, she exclaimed, rushing around the counter to pull the young woman into a tight hug. The young woman hugged her back just as fiercely. Of course I did. The older woman held her at arm's length, studying her face. You look tired. Are you eating properly? The young woman laughed. Yes, Mama. I'm fine. This was the person who had always believed in her. The one who had worked double shifts just to keep a roof over their heads. The one who had taught her that kindness mattered more than money. Her mother. A quiet corner table. They sat together, steaming cups of coffee between them. The young woman slid one of the gift boxes across the table. Her mother frowned. What's this? Open it. With hesitant fingers, her mother untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Her breath caught. Inside lay the diamond bracelet, the same one the saleswoman had refused to show her the day before. Her mother's eyes widened. This is too much. The young woman shook her head. It's not enough. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered with emotion. You gave up everything for me. You went hungry so I could eat. You worked until your hands ached so I could go to school. This? She gestured to the bracelet. This is just a thing. It doesn't even come close to what you deserve. Her mother's hands trembled as she touched the diamonds. But, how? Where did you get the money? The young woman smiled. Remember that little project I told you about? The one you said would change everything? Her mother gasped. It worked? Better than I ever imagined. Tears welled in her mother's eyes, not because of the jewelry, but because of the look on her daughter's face. Pride. Relief. Love. Meanwhile, back at the jewelry store. The staff were still reeling from yesterday's incident. The saleswoman who had ignored the young woman couldn't focus. Every time the door opened, she tensed, half expecting to see her again. A customer approached the counter, a middle-aged man in casual clothes. He didn't look rich, but after yesterday's lesson, she forced a polite smile. "How can I help you, sir?" The man hesitated. "I'm looking for something special for my wife. It's our anniversary." Normally, she would have directed him to the cheaper items. But today, she showed him everything, even the pieces she thought he couldn't afford. To her shock, he picked out a stunning emerald ring. As she rang it up, he chuckled. "You know, I walked into another store earlier, and they ignored me. But you treated me like I mattered. That's why I bought it here." Her face burned with shame. Back at the cafe. The young woman and her mother talked for hours, laughing, reminiscing, making plans. The bracelet stayed on the table between them, beautiful but unimportant compared to the moment. Finally, her mother reached out and took her hand. "I'm proud of you. Not because of the money or the success, but because you're still you." The young woman squeezed her hand. "I learned from the best." As they left the cafe, her mother wearing the bracelet with quiet pride, the young woman glanced at her phone. A notification flashed, a news article about her company's success. She swiped it away. None of that mattered today. Today was for family. The news spread faster than anyone expected. By the next afternoon, whispers about the mysterious young woman who had humbled the high-end jewelry store were everywhere: social media, gossip blogs, even the local news. A grainy security camera photo of her in her simple clothes had leaked online, sparking debates about wealth, appearances, and how people treat strangers. The jewelry store's phone rang non-stop. Some callers pretended to be interested customers, only to ask snidely, "Do you help all your clients, or just the rich ones?" Others demanded to speak to the manager, threatening boycotts. The store's reputation was crumbling in real time. Meanwhile, the young woman sat in her office, a sleek, modern space in the heart of the city, scanning the headlines with an unreadable expression. She hadn't planned for this. All she'd wanted was to prove a point. Now, the world was watching. Her assistant hesitated in the doorway. They called again." She didn't need to ask who they were. The jewelry store's corporate office had been desperately trying to reach her all morning. Apologies, offers, even a request for a collaboration. She set her phone down. Ignore them. But they had their chance. At the jewelry store. The manager paced his office, sweating through his shirt. The corporate higher-ups had ripped into him over a furious conference call. "Fix this. Now." But how? The saleswoman who had started it all sat slumped in a chair, her perfect hair now messy from running her hands through it all morning. "I didn't know," she muttered for the 100th time. The manager whirled on her. "That's the problem. You judged her the second she walked in." A knock at the door interrupted them. Another employee peeked in, holding a small envelope. "This just arrived. For her." The manager snatched it. Inside was a single handwritten note. "You taught me a valuable lesson. Now I'm returning the favor." No signature. No explanation. Just those words, and a business card for a competing jewelry brand. The color drained from the manager's face. A bold move. That evening, the young woman walked into a rival jewelry store, this time, cameras following her every move. The staff here had seen the news. They greeted her warmly, offering champagne and personalized service. She didn't buy anything. Instead, she turned to the reporters. "This is how customers should always be treated," she said simply. Then she left, letting the message sink in. By midnight, the video of her statement had gone viral. The rival store's sales skyrocketed. The original store? Their stocks plummeted. A late-night visitor. Back at her penthouse, the young woman was startled by a knock at the door. Through the peephole, she saw the saleswoman from the first store, eyes red, hands shaking. Against her better judgment, she opened the door. The woman burst into tears. "I lost my job today," she choked out. My kids." The young woman stayed silent, letting her cry. Finally, the saleswoman looked up, raw with shame. "I'm sorry. I was awful. But please, just tell me why. Why did you do this?" The young woman studied her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside, gesturing inside. "Sit down. I'll tell you my story, all of it. And then you'll understand." The saleswoman sat stiffly on the edge of a plush sofa, her fingers twisting together. The penthouse was nothing like she'd imagined, warm, lived in, with framed photos crowding the shelves instead of cold, expensive decor. The young woman handed her a cup of tea. "Start from the beginning," she said. "Tell me why you treated me the way you did." The saleswoman swallowed hard. It's just how things are. The store trains us to prioritize clients who look like they'll spend. If someone comes in dressed, well, like you did." She trailed off, shamefaced. The young woman nodded slowly. "So you judge people based on clothes?" "It's not me, it's the system," the saleswoman blurted. "The managers track our sales per customer ratios. If we waste time on people who don't buy, we get written up. I have to make snap judgments or I lose my job." She looked down. "I did lose it." A heavy silence fell. Then the young woman did something unexpected. She laughed. Not cruelly, but with bitter recognition. "Funny. That's exactly what I thought you'd say." She leaned forward. "But here's what your system never taught you. Every person walking through that door is fighting a battle you know nothing about." She stood abruptly and crossed to a framed photo on the wall, a faded picture of a thin girl in a too-big school uniform, standing beside a tired-looking woman outside a tiny food stall. "That's me. 12 years old. My mother sold fried snacks on the street until midnight every day so I could go to school." Her voice hardened. "One afternoon, a woman in a fancy coat walked past our stall. I accidentally brushed against her, and she shoved me into the gutter because my clothes were dirty." The saleswoman flinched. "That day, I promised myself 2 things." The young woman held up a finger. "1, I'd never let anyone make me feel small again." A second finger joined the first. "And 2, if I ever got rich, I'd never become the kind of person who treats others like they're invisible." She turned back to the saleswoman, eyes blazing. "So when you looked right through me in that store, it wasn't just rude. It proved nothing's changed." The saleswoman's hands trembled around her teacup. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't." The young woman sighed. "Nobody ever does, until it's their turn to be ignored." The next morning, a viral post. At 8 a.m., a new video trended worldwide. It showed the young woman sitting beside the same saleswoman at a conference table, announcing a new initiative, the Blank Page Challenge. "Starting today," she said calmly, "my foundation will send undercover testers into luxury stores worldwide, dressed, poor, just like I was. Any business caught discriminating loses funding. Those who treat every customer with respect? They'll get free advertising from me." The saleswoman, now tearful but composed, added. And I'll personally train their staff, because I learned this lesson the hard way. The internet exploded. At the original jewelry store. The manager watched the video with mounting horror. His phone rang, corporate headquarters. He answered with a shaky, "Sir." "Shut it down," the CEO roared. "Close the store today and fire everyone involved. Then issue a public apology before this ruins us completely." But it was too late. By noon, protesters gathered outside the shop, holding signs that read, "We all deserve to be seen." Epilogue, 1 year later. The young woman stood outside a small but bustling jewelry boutique, the new business owned and operated by the former saleswoman. No more suits. No more snobbery. Just handcrafted pieces at fair prices, with a sign on the door, "All are welcome here." As they hugged, the saleswoman whispered, "Thank you for giving me a second chance." The young woman smiled. "Thank you for earning it." Inside, a little girl in a patched dress pressed her nose to the glass, eyeing a beaded bracelet. Without hesitation, the saleswoman knelt beside her. "Want to try it on, sweetheart?" And in that moment, the cycle finally broke. The little girl's eyes widened as the saleswoman, now the owner, gently fastened the beaded bracelet around her thin wrist. "It's pretty," the girl whispered, turning her arm to watch the beads catch the light. Her mother, hovering nervously behind her in worn sandals, touched her shoulder. "We're just looking, sweetie. Put it back." The owner shook her head firmly. "It's a gift." She met the mother's wary gaze. "No strings. I promise." The mother's stiff posture softened, just slightly, but the wariness in her eyes remained. The kind of wariness that comes from a lifetime of being dismissed. Across the store, the young woman watched this exchange with quiet satisfaction. This was the change she'd wanted. Not just a public apology or a viral moment, but a real shift in how people treated each other. The bell above the door jingled. A well-dressed couple walked in, their designer clothes and confident strides marking them as the kind of customers the old store would have fawned over. The owner started to stand, but the young woman subtly shook her head. "Wait." Sure enough, the couple barely glanced at the mother and daughter before heading straight for the most expensive display case. "We need a gift for my mother's birthday," the woman announced loudly. "Something impressive." The owner hesitated, then deliberately turned back to the little girl. "Want to see how the beads glow in sunlight?" She led them to the window, leaving the wealthy couple momentarily ignored. The woman in designer heels blinked in surprise. "Excuse me." The owner smiled over her shoulder. "I'll be right with you. Everyone gets equal time here." The young woman had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. Perfect. 6 months later, a ripple effect. The blank page challenge had spread far beyond jewelry stores. Restaurants that once sneered at poorly dressed diners now competed for Best Welcoming Service awards. Car dealerships trained staff to greet every browser with coffee and respect. A viral video showed a homeless man being fitted for a free suit at a high-end boutique, a direct response to the movement. But the young woman's favorite development? The flood of messages from people who'd been inspired to act. "I tipped a street vendor extra today because I finally saw how hard she works. I hired a single mom for a job even though her resume had gaps. She's our best employee now. I sat next to an old man on the bus who smelled bad. Turns out he's a war vet with no family. We have lunch every Sunday now." Small acts. Human acts. The kind that no viral campaign could manufacture. An unexpected visitor. One rainy afternoon, the young woman answered her door to find the original jewelry store manager standing there, soaked and hollow-eyed. "I lost everything," he said without preamble. "The company made me the scapegoat. My wife left. I've been driving for a rideshare app to pay rent." He shoved trembling hands in his pockets. "I'm not asking for pity. I need to know how you did it. She arched a brow. Did what? Started over. His voice cracked. Became someone better. For the first time, she saw him not as a villain, but as another person trapped by the same system she'd fought against. She stepped aside. Come in. I'll make coffee. As they talked, a surprising realization struck her: this man could become our strongest ally. Who better to train businesses than someone who'd lived the toxicity firsthand? By the time he left, he had a new job offer, and the first spark of hope she'd seen in his eyes. The final test. On the anniversary of her first jewelry store visit, the young woman dressed in her original faded jeans and worn sneakers. She visited 5 luxury stores across the city, including the one that had started it all, now under new ownership. At every location, the result was the same: immediate greetings. Respectful service. Not a single condescending glance. As she exited the last store, a reporter shoved a microphone in her face. After a year of change, are you satisfied? She considered the question carefully. Satisfied? No. This isn't a finish line. But hopeful? She glanced at the bustling street around her, where a street vendor laughed with a suited banker, where a teen in ripped jeans held the door for an elderly woman with a walker. Yeah. I'm hopeful. The young woman stood at the entrance of the newly renamed jewelry store, Legacy and Light, where the old, snobbish boutique had once been. The grand reopening was packed. Reporters snapped photos, influencers live-streamed, and curious locals lined up to see what the buzz was about. But her eyes were fixed on one person in the crowd, a little girl in a patched yellow dress, clutching her mother's hand. The same little girl who had been given a free bracelet months ago. The owner, her former adversary, spotted them too and immediately broke away from a TV interview to kneel in front of the child. You came back, she beamed. The girl shyly held up her wrist, where the beads had been carefully restrung into a necklace. I wanted to keep it safe, she whispered. The young woman felt something tighten in her chest. This was why she'd done it all. Not for fame, not for revenge, but so that little girls like this one would never learn to shrink themselves. The speech no one expected. When the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, the crowd expected the young woman to take the microphone. Instead, she gestured for the former manager, now the store's head of customer experience, to step forward. His hands shook as he spoke. A year ago, I lost everything because I didn't see people. Only profits. He looked directly at the saleswoman turned owner. She taught me that dignity isn't a luxury. It's a right. Then, to everyone's shock, he announced, starting today, 10% of every sale goes to funding education for kids in underserved neighborhoods, because talent isn't determined by zip codes. The applause was thunderous. But the young woman was watching the little girl in yellow, who was now staring wide-eyed at the jewelry displays. At the possibilities. A full-circle moment. After the event, as staff served lemonade and cookies, the young woman slipped away to the store's quietest corner, where the most affordable items were proudly displayed. She picked out a tiny silver charm shaped like a sun. Found what you were looking for? She turned to see her mother smiling at her. The same woman who'd worked double shifts, who'd never owned jewelry in her life, now wearing the diamond bracelet with quiet pride. The young woman held up the charm. For the girl in the yellow dress. So she remembers her worth isn't tied to what she owns. Her mother's eyes glistened. You've grown up so much. Learn from the best, she echoed their old refrain. The ripple continues. As weeks passed, the Legacy and Light model inspired other businesses. A high-end restaurant launched free cooking classes for at-risk youth. A tech CEO mandated blind resume reviews to combat hiring bias. Even the rival jewelry store that had benefited from the scandal introduced a "pay what you can" collection. But the most powerful moment came unexpectedly. A viral photo showed the little girl from the store standing outside her school's career day, wearing her bead necklace and holding a sign, "When I grow up, I'll treat everyone kindly." One last visit. On a quiet afternoon, the young woman returned to the original store location alone. No cameras, no fanfare. Just her and the memories. The current owner found her tracing a finger over the spot where she'd once been ignored. "Regrets?" she asked gently. The young woman shook her head. "Just thinking about how far we've come." The owner handed her a small box. Inside was a simple keychain with a single word engraved, "Catalyst." "For starting the fire," the owner explained. The young woman laughed softly. "Not a fire. A light." And as she stepped back into the sunlight, she knew, this wasn't an ending. It was the first spark of something much bigger.